Young Millionaire pretended to be broke to test a woman's love. Her reaction left him speechless. The coffee shop door slammed open, letting in a gust of cold wind, and a man who looked like he had just walked out of a storm, his hair damp, his jacket frayed, and his boots caked with mud. "Is there any chance you're still serving coffee?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a hint of exhaustion. Cassie looked up from wiping the counter, her heart skipping a beat. The man was ruggedly handsome, with piercing green eyes that seemed out of place with the rest of his disheveled appearance. "You're cutting it close," she said with a small smile. "But I think I can manage one last cup." "Thank you," he said, a tinge of relief in his voice as he sank into the nearest chair. Cassie poured his coffee, watching him from the corner of her eye. He looked like someone who'd had a hard day or maybe a hard life. She set the cup in front of him, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Rough night," he chuckled, the sound low and warm. "You could say that. Lost my job today, lost my apartment last week. It's been a month," Cassie's smile faltered. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," he said quickly, glancing at her name tag. "You don't even know me, Cassie." "Maybe not," she replied, leaning on the counter, "but I know what it's like to struggle. And everyone deserves a little kindness." The man studied her for a moment, then extended a calloused hand. "I'm Jake." "Nice to meet you, Jake." Cassie shook his hand, her fingers brushing against his rough skin. "The coffee's on the house." "Consider it my small act of kindness for the day." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Generous of you. I'll pay you back one day." "You don't have to," she said with a laugh. "But if it makes you feel better, you can leave a tip when things turn around for you." Jake smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Deal?" Over the next few weeks, Jake became a regular at the coffee shop. He always came in late, just before closing, and Cassie always made sure there was a fresh pot of coffee waiting for him. They talked about everything: books, music, dreams. He told her he was looking for work, that he'd been crashing on a friend's couch to get by. She told him about her own struggles, juggling 2 jobs and trying to pay off her late mother's medical bills. "What would you do if money wasn't an issue?" Jake asked one night, his green eyes locked on hers. Cassie hesitated, then shrugged. "I'd open my own bakery. Something small and cozy where people could come to feel at home, but that's just a dream." "Why does it have to be just a dream?" she laughed. "Because dreams cost money. And I've got about $18 to my name." Jake smiled faintly. "Dreams are worth chasing, Cassie. Even if they seem impossible." What Cassie didn't know was that Jake wasn't who he claimed to be. Jake Turner was a millionaire, young, ambitious, and one of the most promising entrepreneurs in the tech world. He had built a fortune before he turned 30, but after a string of heartbreaks and shallow relationships, he had grown disillusioned with the people around him. Women seemed interested in his money and lifestyle, not the man behind it. So he had decided to test something. He left his penthouse, his luxury cars, and his designer suits behind and adopted the persona of a broke, down-on-his-luck man. He wanted to know if someone could love him for who he truly was, not for what he could provide. From the moment he met Cassie, he was drawn to her. She had a warmth and kindness that felt rare, and she treated him with a generosity he hadn't experienced in years. But as their connection deepened, Jake started to feel the weight of his lies. Every time she looked at him with those trusting eyes, he felt a pang of guilt. One night, Cassie surprised him with a small box wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "Open it," she said, a little shyly. Jake tore off the paper to reveal a pair of leather gloves. They weren't new, but they were in good condition. "I noticed your hands were always cold," she explained. "I know it's not much, but—" Jake stared at the gloves, his chest tightening. "Cassie, this is—" "Thank you," she waved him off. "It's nothing, just something I thought you could use." "It's not nothing," he said, his voice thick. "It's more than I deserve." Cassie tilted her head, studying him. "You're a good man, Jake. Don't let whatever you're going through make you forget that." Jake swallowed hard, unable to meet her gaze. "I don't know what I did to deserve you in my life, Cassie." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "Maybe you were just in the right place at the right time." Jake smiled faintly, but inside his guilt was growing. How much longer could he keep up this charade? And what would happen when she found out the truth? A week later, Jake came into the coffee shop with a different energy. He seemed restless, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something more urgent. "Cassie, can I ask you something?" he said, his voice low. "Of course," she replied, her heart skipping a beat. "If someone lied to you, but their intentions were good, would you forgive them?" Cassie frowned. "I guess it would depend on the lie and the person." Jake nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "What if they were scared? Scared of losing something or someone they cared about?" "Then I'd say they should stop lying and tell the truth," she said gently. "Because the longer they wait, the harder it'll be." Jake looked at her, his green eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. "You're right," he murmured. "You always are." Jake didn't show up at the coffee shop for 3 days. Cassie tried to convince herself she wasn't worried. People had lives after all. Maybe he'd found a job or moved to a better place. Maybe he was just busy. But the gnawing feeling in her gut told her otherwise. Jake wasn't the type to disappear without a word, not after all the nights they'd spent talking about everything under the sun. On the 4th night, as she wiped down the counter in the empty shop, the bell above the door jingled. Her head snapped up, her heart leaping in her chest. It wasn't Jake. Instead, a man in a sleek gray suit entered, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. He looked so out of place in the cozy, worn-down coffee shop that Cassie almost laughed. He was tall, with sharp features and an air of authority that made the small space feel even smaller. "Can I help you?" she asked, setting the rag aside. "Are you Cassie?" The man's voice was smooth but clipped, like he was used to getting straight to the point, her brows furrowed. "Yes." "Who's asking?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card, placing it on the counter in front of her. "My name is Henry Caldwell. I work for Jake Turner." Cassie blinked, staring at the card like it might bite her. "Jake Turner?" "Yes," Henry said, his tone brisk. "He asked me to deliver this to you personally." He slid a plain white envelope across the counter. Cassie hesitated before picking it up, her fingers trembling slightly as she tore it open. Inside was a handwritten note. "Cassie, I need to talk to you. Meet me at the Ivy Room tomorrow at 7 p.m. Please come." Jake, her heart raced as she stared at the elegant cursive, "The Ivy Room." That was one of the fanciest restaurants in the city, way out of her league. And what was with the sudden, formal delivery? "Why didn't Jake give this to me himself?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "Mr. Turner has been occupied," Henry said, choosing his words carefully. "But he's very insistent that you meet him tomorrow." Cassie opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself. Something about the way Henry looked at her like he knew more than he was letting on made her pause. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll be there." Henry nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Good. He'll be expecting you." With that, he turned on his heel and walked out, leaving Cassie alone with the note and 1,000 questions swirling in her mind. The next day, Cassie stood outside the Ivy Room, her nerves threatening to get the better of her. She'd spent the last of her savings on a simple black dress and borrowed a pair of heels from her coworker. Even so, she felt wildly out of place as couples in designer outfits breezed past her, their laughter echoing through the crisp evening air. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, the warm glow of chandeliers bathing the room in golden light. A hostess greeted her with a practiced smile. "Do you have a reservation?" I'm meeting someone, Jake Turner." The hostess's smile widened slightly. "Right this way, miss." Cassie followed her through the opulent dining room, her heart pounding with every step. When they reached a secluded table near the back, her breath caught. Jake was already there, but he looked nothing like the man she'd come to know. Gone were the frayed jacket and muddy boots. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit that fit him perfectly, his hair neatly styled. Even his demeanor was different, calm, composed, and exuding a quiet confidence that made him seem almost like a stranger. "Cassie," he said, standing as she approached. "Jake," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He pulled out her chair, waiting for her to sit before taking his own. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Cassie's mind raced as she took in the lavish surroundings. Who was this man in front of her? "I'm sorry for the theatrics," Jake said finally, his voice softer than she expected. "I didn't know how else to do this." "Do what?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "What's going on, Jake? And don't tell me you suddenly came into money, because this," she gestured around the room, "doesn't happen overnight." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. It didn't happen overnight, because I've always had money, Cassie." Her stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "I lied to you," he admitted, his gaze steady on hers. "I'm not broke. I'm not crashing on a friend's couch. I'm a millionaire." Cassie stared at him, the words not quite registering. "You're joking." "I wish I were," he said, his tone laced with regret. "But it's the truth. My name is Jake Turner, I own a tech company, and the reason I didn't tell you is because I needed to know if you cared about me for me, not for what I could give you." She felt like the floor had been ripped out from under her. "So this was all a test?" "No," Jake said quickly, leaning forward. "At first, maybe, but then I met you and everything changed. You're the most genuine, kind-hearted person I've ever known, Cassie. I didn't want to lie to you, but I was scared that if you knew the truth, it would ruin everything." Cassie's hands clenched in her lap. "You didn't trust me?" "I didn't trust anyone," he admitted. "Not until you showed me what it means to care about someone really care. But I know I've hurt you, and I'm so sorry for that." She stared at him, her chest tight with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to get up and walk out, but another part, an infuriatingly stubborn part, wanted to stay and hear him out. "Why tell me now?" she asked finally. "Because I couldn't keep lying to you," Jake said, his voice trembling slightly. "And because I'm in love with you, Cassie. I've never felt this way about anyone before, and I couldn't live with myself if I let you go without telling you the truth." Her breath caught at his words, her heart warring with her head. She'd grown to care for Jake deeply, but this revelation felt like a betrayal. Could she forgive him? Before she could respond, Jake reached across the table and took her hand in his. "Please," he said, his green eyes pleading. "Tell me what I can do to make this right. I'll do anything, Cassie. Just don't walk away from me." Cassie looked down at their joined hands, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and emotion. She didn't know what to say, but one thing was clear: this wasn't the end of their story. Not yet. Cassie didn't walk away. She stayed at the table, her hand still in Jake's, though her mind was reeling. The weight of his confession hung between them like an invisible wall, and for a moment neither of them knew what to say next. A waiter approached, breaking the silence. "Would you like to see the menu, madam?" he asked, offering her a leather-bound booklet. Cassie blinked, snapping out of her thoughts. Sure." She took the menu, her fingers brushing the soft leather. She wasn't even hungry, but she needed time to think. She glanced at Jake, who was watching her intently, as if trying to read her mind. Jake gestured to the waiter. "We'll have the chef's tasting menu. And a bottle of the house red, please." The waiter nodded and disappeared, leaving Cassie staring at Jake in disbelief. The chef's tasting menu. "Jake, do you even know how much that costs?" He gave her a small, almost sheepish smile. "It's on me," Cassie let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. Of course it is. You're a millionaire, right? What's a few $100s to you? Jake winced at her tone. Cassie, I know this is a lot to process, and I don't blame you for being upset. But I brought you here because I wanted to be honest with you, completely honest. Honest, she repeated, her voice laced with sarcasm. That's rich coming from someone who's been lying to me for weeks. I know, he said softly, his green eyes filled with regret, and I hate myself for it. But please, just let me explain. Cassie crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair. Go ahead, I'm listening. Jake took a deep breath, clearly trying to find the right words. When I met you, I was at a point in my life where I didn't trust anyone. Every relationship I've had has been tainted by money. Women didn't see me, they saw my bank account, my lifestyle. And I was tired of it. I wanted something real. So you decided to play dress up as a broke guy to see how the other half lives, Cassie asked, her tone sharp. Jake flinched but didn't look away. I didn't plan it, not at first. I walked into that coffee shop because I was having a bad day. I just wanted to feel normal for a little while, and then I met you. His voice softened. You were so kind to me, Cassie. You didn't know me, didn't owe me anything, but you treated me like I mattered. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could just be myself. Cassie's heart clenched at his words, but she kept her expression guarded. And what about now? Are you still just being yourself, or is this, she gestured to his suit, the restaurant, the real you? This is part of me, Jake admitted, but it's not all of me. The man sitting across from you right now is the same man who sat at your counter every night, drinking your coffee and talking about dreams and books and music. The same man who admired your strength and generosity and fell for you because of it. Cassie's breath hitched, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. You say that like it makes everything okay. Like I'm just supposed to forgive you because you had good intentions. Jake's shoulders sagged. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, I just want you to know the truth. And I want the chance to prove to you that what I feel is real. Before Cassie could respond, the waiter returned with the first course, a delicate plate of seared scallops with a drizzle of saffron sauce. She stared at it, her appetite non-existent, but Jake picked up his fork and took a small bite, clearly trying to ease the tension. Cassie, he said after a moment, his voice quiet, I know I've made mistakes, and I know I don't deserve your trust right now. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn it back. She looked at him, her emotions swirling like a storm inside her. Part of her wanted to believe him, to see the man she'd grown to care for beneath the layers of wealth and deception. But another part of her was still hurt, still wary. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching. You don't have to decide tonight. Take all the time you need. I'll wait for you, Cassie. As long as it takes. His words hung in the air, and for the first time she saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear of losing her, the sincerity of his feelings. It was enough to crack the wall she'd built around her heart, just a little. I'll think about it, she said finally, her voice steady but guarded. Jake nodded, his expression a mix of relief and determination. That's all I can ask. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Cassie. She couldn't stop thinking about Jake, his confession, his words, the way he'd looked at her with such raw honesty. She didn't know what to do, torn between the connection they'd built and the betrayal she felt. On the fourth day, she found herself back at the coffee shop, wiping down the counter as the evening crowd trickled in. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the man standing at the door until he cleared his throat. She looked up, and there he was, Jake, holding a bouquet of wildflowers in one hand and a sheepish smile on his face. Can we talk? He asked, his voice tentative. Cassie hesitated, then nodded, setting her rag aside. 5 minutes. Jake stepped inside, handing her the flowers. I know I probably shouldn't be here, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. I wanted to see you. Cassie took the bouquet, her fingers brushing against his for a fleeting moment. Jake, I told you I needed time. I know, he said quickly. And I'm not here to rush you, I just wanted to give you these. To let you know I'm still thinking about you. And to remind you that I meant every word I said. She studied him for a long moment, her heart warring with her head. Finally, she sighed. Thank you for the flowers. They're beautiful. Jake's smile widened, a flicker of hope in his eyes. You're welcome. Before she could say anything else, a customer called for her attention and she turned away, the flowers still in her hands. When she glanced back, Jake was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. Cassie looked down at the bouquet, her heart aching in a way she couldn't quite explain. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: Jake Turner wasn't giving up on her. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready to give up on him either. Jake stood at the entrance of the coffee shop, staring at the bouquet of wildflowers in Cassie's hands through the glass door. He hadn't meant to linger, but something about seeing her hold the flowers, a small piece of himself he had offered, rooted him in place. She turned, heading toward the back counter, and for a moment he allowed himself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, she would let him prove he was worthy of her trust. He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to step away. Now wasn't the time to push. He'd done what he could for now, the rest was up to her. The next morning, Cassie's best friend and coworker, Lauren, placed her hands on her hips, staring at the wildflower bouquet sitting on the counter of Cassie's apartment. Okay, Lauren began, her voice tinged with exasperation. Are we going to talk about this whole Jake is secretly a millionaire thing, or are you just going to keep avoiding it? Cassie, who had been half-heartedly stirring her oatmeal at the kitchen table, sighed. What's there to talk about? He lied to me, Lauren, for weeks. He pretended to be someone he wasn't. Lauren raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. And why do you think he did that? Cassie shrugged, though her shoulders felt heavy. He said he wanted to know if someone could love him for who he is, not his money. And do you? Lauren asked bluntly, sitting across from her. Cassie froze, her spoon hovering over her bowl. What? Lauren leaned forward. Do you love him? The broke guy you thought he was, the millionaire he actually is. Doesn't matter which version do you love him. Cassie opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her mind raced back to the nights they'd spent talking at the coffee shop, the way Jake would listen to her so intently, like every word she said mattered. She thought of the way he made her laugh, the way his green eyes softened whenever he looked at her. And then she thought of his confession, the vulnerability in his voice as he told her he was in love with her. Lauren smirked, clearly reading her expression. That's what I thought, Cassie groaned, burying her face in her hands. It's not that simple. Why not? Lauren pressed. He's crazy about you, Cass, you know that. And yeah, he lied, but honestly. If I were a millionaire, I'd probably do the same thing. Do you know how many gold diggers are out there? Cassie peeked at her friend through her fingers. So you think I should just forgive him? I think, Lauren said, standing up and grabbing her purse, that you need to figure out what you want. And if what you want is Jake, then don't let your pride get in the way. That evening, Cassie found herself pacing her tiny apartment, clutching her phone in one hand and the small business card Jake's assistant had left her in the other. She had debated for hours whether she should call him, but every time she dialed the number, she panicked and hung up. Finally, she dropped the phone on the couch and grabbed her coat. She didn't need to call. She knew where to find him. Jake was sitting in his office, staring blankly at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. His assistant, Henry, had just left after delivering yet another report, a report Jake couldn't focus on because his mind was consumed by Cassie. He had done everything he could to give her space, but the waiting was unbearable. Every second that passed without hearing from her felt like an eternity. A sudden knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. He frowned, glancing at the time. It was nearly 8 p.m. Who would be visiting him now? He opened the door and his heart stopped. "Cassie," he breathed, his voice barely audible. She stood there, looking slightly out of breath, her cheeks flushed from the chilly evening air. Her eyes met his, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Jake stepped aside immediately, holding the door open for her. "Of course." Cassie walked into the penthouse, her eyes scanning the luxurious space. The sleek, modern furniture, the abstract art on the walls, the glittering chandelier above it was a far cry from the coffee shop where they'd first met. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "So this is the real you," Jake rubbed the back of his neck. "Part of me, yeah, but it's not the part that matters." Cassie tilted her head. "And what part does matter?" Jake took a step closer, his green eyes locked on hers. "The part that's standing in front of you, terrified of losing you. The part that fell in love with you because of your kindness, your strength, your heart." Her breath hitched, but she quickly masked it. "Jake, I came here because I needed to say something." He nodded, his chest tightening. "I'm listening." Cassie took a deep breath, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her coat. "I was hurt when you lied to me, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything. But the truth is, I can't stop thinking about you." "About us?" Hope flickered in Jake's eyes, but he didn't interrupt her. "I care about you," she continued, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "And I think I could forgive you. But I need to know one thing." "Anything," Jake said immediately. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Out of all the people you could have chosen to test, why did you pick me?" Jake's expression softened, and he reached out, gently taking her hands in his. "Because from the moment I met you, I knew you were different. You didn't care about appearances or status. You cared about people. And when I was with you, I felt like I could finally be myself. No pretenses, no masks, just Jake." Cassie searched his eyes, and for the first time she saw everything she had been searching for: honesty, vulnerability, and an overwhelming amount of love. She took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "You hurt me, Jake, but I think I can forgive you, because I love the man you are, not the millionaire, not the guy in the suit. Just you." Jake's breath caught, and for a moment he was speechless. Then, without thinking, he pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. "I love you, Cassie," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "And I promise, I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you." She smiled against his chest, her arms wrapping around him tightly. "You better," Jake chuckled, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. "How about I start now?" Before she could ask what he meant, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Cassie's eyes widened as he opened it, revealing a simple but stunning diamond ring. "Cassie, I know this is sudden, and I know I've made mistakes, but I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at him, her heart swelling with love. "Yes," she whispered, a smile breaking across her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jake slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. Then he cupped her face and kissed her, a kiss filled with all the love and passion he had been holding back. In that moment, nothing else mattered, not the lies, not the misunderstandings. All that mattered was the love they had found in each other, a love that was real, lasting, and absolutely worth fighting for. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, both of them knew that this was only the beginning of their forever.